Hello and welcome to another industry report. So, after a notable absence, one presumably prompted by their previous bout of controversy, Nicalis are back in the news, and they are back in the news for launching an assault on fan-made cave story projects. Now, Nicalis had stayed out of the news after earning themselves, one of the worst reputations in the industry. They're a group who screwed over the devs of Enter the Gungeon. They're also the group that oversee The Binding of Isaac and a lot of other games that you've probably heard of. And even with that all being the case, it's pretty much unanimously agreed in the industry that they are a bit of a pack of dicks. So, covering this one is going to be real fun. And by the way, it's almost the end of the month, so if you would like to pick up, there's the Demon Hunter pin, there's the 2020 channel logo edition pin, a bunch of stuff on the Patreon. Few days that'll be, over to a new month, so if you're interested in this stuff, check it out. With that said though, let's go. First, the history. Cave Story is incredible, and it was released in 2004 by a solo dev who goes by the name of Pixel. It was a freeware game that Nicalis then later took to the Nintendo DS and Wii, with them also developing Cave Story Plus and Cave Story 3D. We'll get to it later. Now, the original freeware version of Cave Story has since been decompiled, and that has allowed for basically a number of excellent fan-made projects. These are projects that Nicalis have taken issue with, though, for the Cave Story Engine 2 repository has been removed from GitHub following a DMCA notice. Nicalis say that it is using source code from their version of Cave Story. That very much appears to be a load of bull. It's actually based on the original freeware version of Cave Story. Yes, freeware. The claim from Nicalis is extremely shaky, but that's something that very much fits their reputation. And overall, it does look like a situation where they know that they are the people who publish Cave Story Plus. Therefore, if you remove the supply of fanware, essentially Cave Story projects, then maybe it makes it such that the way to get Cave Story is through them, even though the original Cave Story is, of course, a freeware project. Nicalis have a rather confusing relationship with Pixel and the Cave Story intellectual property. The official word, right, is that Cave Story is licensed to Nicalis, but that the IP is owned by Pixel, and that essentially would mean that quashing the original freeware project would be, we believe, outside of Nicalis' remit. But a DMCA notice was issued last year against a Kickstarter for an Xbox One port of the game, and it stated that Nicalis' rights include the game's title, logo, story, characters, artwork, music, and packaging. So essentially, that would be really their rights would essentially be an exclusive right to exploit the Cave Story, or sort of intellectual property, trademarks, and all of that stuff. So it has been believed for a while that Nicalis basically duped Pixel out of the rights to Cave Story, and it essentially is a situation where Pixel owns the IP for Cave Story, but basically has no rights to exploit that IP. And that's why many people think there has never been a follow-up from Pixel. And while this is an accepted narrative, there is not firm evidence to back it up. But still, things like that do happen. I mean, as an example, I quite well know somebody who literally does own an intellectual property and also can literally do absolutely nothing with it because the IP, all exploitation of it, is owned by another party. But still, in lieu of Pixel being involved here, Nicalis have proceeded to not particularly treat the Cave Story IP well over the years. Each new version seems to introduce a new suite of bugs and issues, plus the visuals on Cave Story 3D, I think they leave a lot to be desired. And that means that the best version continues to be the freeware version. Get the freeware version. Under no circumstances support Nicalis. And sadly, that doesn't have a great implication for some great games that they've published, like The Binding of Isaac. To really understand this, one has to understand the influence of Cave Story, what it actually means. Because this is a beloved title. If you've not heard of it, you probably can't even appreciate how core this is, even to so many of the games that you have played. This is such a part of gaming history. I mean, remember the date that it came out, right? It was around at a time where there weren't notable indie games for the industry and developers to look to for inspiration. And when we think of the progenitors of the modern indie gaming scene, what do we think of, right? We think of Super Meat Boy, we think of Braid, we think of maybe Fez, things like that. No. Cave Story predates those games by years. It was a complete triumph for the time. One that, of course, has got its own influences, Metroid, Castlevania, Mega Man, classic JRPGs, things like that. But really, it's that lineage, that history, where this game is like an origin point of so much of where indie gaming is now. That's why the industry is not taking this well. This is not a thing where, the gamers on Twitter are angry. Maybe with a capital G, as some outlets would spell it. No, it's not that. This is somewhere where people who love games are angry, and people who make games are angry. And I think it's pretty obvious, because this is a game that has been a source of inspiration for so many developers. Notable industry pros have, of course, weighed in on this, and they are not happy, believing that basically anything based off the freeware version of Cave Story should be out of Nicalis' control and is out of their control, and that Nicalis' attempts to quash fan games basically amounts to them trying to erase the original's legacy. And that indeed it goes against the heart of Cave Story, because at one point, this is a very, I think, essential anecdote to understanding it, Pixel gave away the source code to facilitate a Linux port. I mean, yeah, if this guy is giving away the source code, obviously fan games should be okay. Right? And for one example, and very much an example from the community that Cave Story would have inspired, we can go to Rami Ismail, who has said his piece, very much doubling down on the idea that Nicalis are disrespecting everything Cave Story meant, and as he puts it, everything it helped make happen. And we're picking out his tweet mainly because it's emblematic of how indies and fans and a lot of industry pros have actually taken this. Very much that it feels like a personal attack on a community. So with this sort of thing happening, let's talk about Nicalis' dire reputation. Their bad rep extends well beyond Cave Story, of course. It is one of the worst in the entire games industry, I would say. A big Kotaku report from last year went into detail on the ghosting, racism, and exploitation at the publisher. They ghosted indies after signing agreements, which is not really a nice thing to do. Enter the Gungeon. Pretty awesome game. Well, those devs handed over their source code before Nicalis essentially just ceased communication. Even prodding from Devolver Digital didn't help. Yeah, Devolver thrown their hat into the ring for the bands. Ghosting is apparently pretty common when you're doing business with Nicalis, though. Communication sucks. Patch requests get ignored. Calls and mails are not returned. They seem like a genuinely terrible partner to be anywhere near. And then you've got the studio boss, Tyrone Rodriguez, who is a controversial enough figure too. The Kotaku article details the exploitative level of control that he has over his employees, telling them how to act, what to say, who to talk to, and apparently demanding the use of racial slurs in work chats. So basically, to me, my personal opinion, is it sounds like it's a mixture of, a big ego, bringing things into professional context that shouldn't be there, and someone with a control freak type of personality. Now, he later apologized for the work chat slurs, saying that they were insensitive and stupid, but still, you really don't go demanding that that's how your employees, talk about things. Now, of course, there's also things like pressuring people to drink, which, don't be doing that. Like, yeah, you're going on a business trip with everyone. Yeah, sure, some of you is going to be up for the banter. I certainly am anytime I've been to Gamescom and stuff, but you got to respect people not wanting to do that. And you don't do what he says, which is saying, come on, don't be a little bitch, which is his catchphrase. That's something you use when somebody in your World of Warcraft Mythic Plus dungeon in your guild is not being great. Not something you use in a professional context with people, whom you've got an invoicing relationship with in the context, I suppose, that's covered by that invoice. Not what you do. And this is all for a company with, supposedly, according to employees, no HR. Oh, also, they remove people's credits after they leave the company. That's a dick move. Yeah, still, they're influential. They oversee big names like Cave Story and The Binding of Isaac. There's that great Terry Kavanagh game as well. VVVVVVVV. That too. But they were one of the first companies to get Nintendo Switch dev kits, despite only being a group of around 20 people. And that is all well and good if they have that good relationship. They even sent extras out to their partners, and it's that situation where it actually seems like Nicalis are a really damn influential middleman between devs and, and the Switch, or at least they were at a point. And given everything that we know about them and how they run and how they actually treat the people they work with, that's not really an ideal thing. One just has to wonder how a group who are so near universally reviled have gotten this far. So there's a bit of context as to why they're not particularly liked. Of course, the core thing for today's video is the cave story situation, where they are quashing fan games that are based on the source code of a freeware game, that source code being literally given out by the developer whenever, of course, he was trying to help facilitate the Linux port. How do we really tie this into a bow? Well, there's not much we can do other than Cave Story is great, and it's sad that Nicalis have control. This could turn into a headache for Nicalis, right? They may be starting a battle they can't hope to win, but clearly fan reputation is not something they care about given how they run things. But still, Cave Story, it's a cornerstone of indie gaming, and trying to quash the freeware, the original version, I mean, that's never going to go well. So it will be interesting to see how this goes. Certainly brings up a lot of things about IP ownership, right? Their willingness to push ahead with shaky claims. A lot of things to think about. I'd say a lot of things that indie devs should think about whenever they sign any form of contract. Certainly, we do, and, just one of those things, like, any of the contracts I've looked at, most indie publishers are actually really good about IP. Like, they don't want to own your IP, generally speaking. The people we've talked to, they don't want IP, right? They, sure, rights to publish, your game and all of that, but they don't want your IP. They want that control. So, man, Nicalis, what's going on? That's it for the video, though. We unfortunately, we don't have a good resolution here, other than, of course, I very much doubt that these things are going to stay DMCA'd, right? Yeah, the GitHub repo will, but come on. There's the private trackers. There's those communities that, they're not going to be able to catch. Yeah, this game's going to be spreading around for a bit. That's it for me. Check out Cave Story, but make sure you don't give Nicalis any money in the process. The original is freeware. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.